Howdy neighbor, how is your garden growing? Today in my garden, we're gonna be talking about the vegetables, fruits, and flowers that you should be growing, plus all the tips you need to know so that you can create the garden of your dreams in the Sunshine State in the month of August. And as always, I'm gonna be using my handy dandy Wild Floridian garden planner. And starting today, you can start pre-ordering for next year's planner at the link right above, or there'll be a link right at the end. Let's talk vegetables. When it comes to the month of August, it is time. I am so excited because we are back to classic vegetable garden season. And what do I mean by classic vegetable garden season? I'm talking about all the things we hear the northerners growing. It's time for those again. So I'm talking tomatoes, peppers, broccolis, lettuces, onions, carrots, beets, pick a thing. If it's one of those things that you always hear people growing in their vegetable garden, that's the time. It's time for those. Away we are moving from things like okras and roselles and back to some of the best stuff that we can grow starts in the month of August. Now in the month of August, there's definitely gonna be a clear difference whether you live in North Florida, Central Florida, or South Florida. So whether you're zone 8, 9, 10, 11, lean in and listen up because let's talk about the differences of what you can or you need to wait on doing. Okay, let's start with my North Floridians. My North Floridians, it's cooling down just the tiniest of smidges so you can get going on all of the things. You can be doing tomatoes, you can be doing peppers, eggplants, corn, but you can also be starting things like broccoli, onions, carrots, like all the things that are part of the classic vegetable gardens, warm weather crops, cold weather crops. It's time. It's time for you to get going. And you really should start getting going in the month of August because you are racing the clock, especially with those warm weather crops, for those sudden cold snaps that are gonna hit in the winter time, those freezes that are gonna take out some of your classic vegetables. So use the beginning of August, get a game plan together if you don't already have one, and get those seeds started. Now for my Central Floridians, it's all about warm weather crops in the month of August. But that doesn't mean you should let cold weather crops off your radar because very shortly, you're gonna be doing those too. So if you don't have your seeds on order, if you don't know what your game plan is gonna be with cold weather crops, you need to do that in the month of August in preparation for September. So for my South Floridians, you are also going to be thinking about starting warm weather crops this month. Because we are so hot, I would definitely be considering holding my seeds towards mid-late August versus getting them going right at the beginning because y'all are hot. Hot down there, spicy hot. Okay. So now you know whether you live in North, Central, or South Florida, you should be considering doing warm weather crops. But there are some tips that we need to know when it comes to fall for warm weather crops that are different from our other warm weather crop season, you know, when we head into spring. One of the key differences that's going to be for fall crops is that we can focus on, how do I put this? The less resilient variety, the slightly less adapted varieties. What do I mean by that? Oftentimes you hear as we're heading into the warm to hot season, I'm talking a lot about get vegetables with small fruits, right? Like you want little tomatoes and you want spicy peppers and stuff like that so that we could keep the pests out. But that is not the case as we head into fall in the month of August. See, in the month of August, if you're gonna be starting things like tomatoes, you wanna be considering getting the ones that, you know, those big juicy tomatoes. Me personally, I'm gonna be doing purple Cherokees, stuff that's in that 8 ounce, 10 ounce, 12 ounce range. I know those who have the planner are probably like, that doesn't seem right because guess what? Pest pressure, it's kind of up at this time of year. So why would we start the stuff that's more likely to be eaten by the bugs? Well, this is one of those counterintuitive things about Florida. Because we're heading away from high pest pressure, we're moving towards the season where wildlife either migrates or it starts to become more dormant, especially bugs. We want to start plants that are going to put bigger fruit out, you know, when they're not around. So the fact that you're going to start tomatoes that are going to put bigger fruit now in August, by the time they're actually making a tomato, we're months and months past and there really won't be as much pest pressure at that time of year. So consider starting things like purple Cherokees, chocolate Cherokees, green Cherokee tomatoes. you know, just pick any of the Cherokees. They're really good. I like this tomato because it's definitely meatier and can be used in a lot of different ways, from fresh caprese to putting it on a sandwich, to putting it in a pita, to making sauces from it, making salsas from it. It's got a lot of versatility. And while I'm gonna go over some varieties in this video, if you wanna hear about all the varieties that worked for me for this last year, check out this video right here. I'll put it in our August playlist at the end of this video so that you can get ideas on varieties, well, that worked for me and will probably work for you. When it comes to peppers, a lot of peppers in the springtime, we focus on things that are a bit hotter. We're in the jalapenos and those spicy peppers because that gives us a natural resistance to pest pressure. But when it comes to like the bell type peppers, everyone has been raving to me about things like Carolina Wonder and Charleston bell peppers. And I know that for me, I've ordered my seeds and I'm definitely gonna be trying those ones this year so that I can get something that's a little bit more like a classic bell pepper. But if you're unable to get those, or you wanna try something that you can just pick up from the store and throw the seeds into your vegetable garden, go ahead and try Cubanelle peppers. This is a mild pepper that's very similar to a bell pepper. One of the major differences, besides it's a little bit brighter green, is that it's a thin wall pepper. But if you can get it established, especially central South Florida, it can produce peppers every single month of the year. And it's a perennial. So if you get it established at this time of year, it will go beyond a single growing season and give you peppers month after month after month for over a year. Now, another tip for you guys, because as you're getting really excited about starting seeds, I do want to give you guys a word of warning. When it comes to Florida and planting seeds, there's not that much difference, but there are a few key differences that you do want to think about, and I want to remind you here in the month of August. One, in August, it is either at the end of August or early September, we always have a giant deluge that hits Florida. This deluge will be so significant, hi butterfly, so significant that we will get 4, 5, 9 inches, and Fort Lauderdale, y'all got 24 inches in one single weekend. This level of rain, no seedling can take. They will get completely drowned out if you have these in an exposed area. The other thing is, even if you have good drainage and the water doesn't drown it, just the beating of a constant heavy rain will just smash them to death. So one of the things you want to make sure you're doing in the month of August is making sure your seedlings are in a protected space until they're, you know, pretty sizable and can be moved out into your garden. I know a lot of tips when you listen to seed tips from up north, they're going to focus a lot more on hardening off because of temperature and sun, but they don't really have the challenge of the rains like we do when we're getting our classic vegetable garden season going. So if you're going to be getting your seeds going, which I recommend you do, definitely make sure these are in a protected space. And another tip when it comes to your seedlings, remember I said pest pressure is pretty high at this time of year? Well, the other thing is that a lot of plants, you know me, I love my butterflies, I love my moths, and a bunch of them use a bunch of your seedlings like tomatoes and broccolis and cauliflowers and cabbages as their host plant, which means they put their eggs on it, the eggs hatch and the caterpillars come out, and then they become the very hungry caterpillar. Well, when you have a baby plant, doesn't matter whether it's a milkweed that's in your native flower garden or it's a tomato plant, they cannot handle being eaten down rapidly when they are tiny. It just kills them off. Once they're established and grows, a little bit of nibbling and losing a leaf here and there is no big deal. But this alone can just absolutely decimate. So beyond just trying to protect your seedlings from the smashing rains, we do need to be very aware of the fact that there's still a lot of bugs and they are very hungry at this time of year and they will definitely eat down your seedlings. So if I didn't convince you to protect your seedlings because of the rain, let me convince you because of the bugs. And if you're looking for more mistakes to avoid when starting your seedlings, I want to send you to this video. This is 7 mistakes that I have made all of these mistakes I have made and killed many seeds. So if you want to make sure you don't make the same mistakes I did and have a much better start to your seedlings, check out this video right here. So let's look at herbs. What herbs should we be adding to our vegetable garden? I mean, it's warm out, so is it time for us to be able to start some things? And the answer is yes. Yes, it is. You can add things like parsley, dill, sage, oregano, and of course, basil. I feel like if you are growing tomatoes and peppers, especially classic, more like bell peppers, you're just heading down the Italian route. You're just heading towards like a caprese, you're gonna go into some sort of pomodoro sauce, and you're gonna need a bunch of basil. So I would highly recommend adding basil. And basil is one of those great ones because even if you don't stay on top of harvesting, it can add a bunch of flowers to your garden. And I don't know if you can see behind me, but there are a ton of bees. And bees are gonna be really critical for you getting a great harvest for your tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, All these warm weather crops need pollinators. So if you don't have a native flower garden, which we'll get into what you should be planting in that in just a second, you should really consider adding basil. Oh, and that brings me to the new Wild Floridian Garden Planner, which you can pre-order. Not only does it still have your vegetable planting guide, it now also has an herb planting guide too. So not only can you keep on track with things like tomatoes and peppers, but you'll also know when to plant your basil too. Oh, it's hot out. I have to move into a shadier location. And that's the thing, August is still really hot, really humid, and really intense sun. So one of the tips you need to be following in the month of August when you're gardening is you still need to be doing those hot weather protective tips. You need to be wearing sunscreen, hats, sunglasses. You should be gardening early in the day or later in the day. And I got a tip from one of you guys, which was that when it comes to gardening, honestly, it's a little bit easier in the evening time as the sun goes down. I went and tested this tip and I agree. It's a lot easier to garden in the back half of the day once that sun gets down, usually for me around 6 p.m., than it is to do it really bright and early in the morning. Which, speaking of how hot it is, I'd like to ask you this question. As someone who's lived most of my life in Florida, I feel August is the beginning of fall. My husband, he grew up in the Pacific Northwest and he likes to tell me all the time that it's not official until the fall equinox. So opinion question to you. When do you feel like fall starts? I know this is like a really messed up question because we really don't have any leaves fall all the way until like December or January. So the classic signs of autumn, we don't get those really here in any version of what is considered fall. But I do wonder, do you consider it fall? Not fall? Is it fall? When does fall start? When do I get to say we're doing fall? Now let's talk fruits. When it comes to fruit, if you don't live in South Florida, we're kind of, it's done. We're not doing it. We're getting too close to the cold weather. I mean, we're not that close to the cold weather, but we're getting the months to establish anything like a banana, a papaya, you know, all these tropical fruiting trees like mangoes. We're not doing that right now. We're gonna hold off until much later in the year. But South Florida, I mean, y'all stay hot. I know, I grew up there. You stay really hot. So if you still want to get a banana in the ground or a papaya, have at it. You don't have much longer to go, but you still can get it in August. But before we move away from fruits, everyone should be considering it's August. We're getting close to the time when you should be planting in the ground strawberries. Take some time right now to go investigate some varieties of strawberries and start getting your bare root starts ordered now. North Floridians, you could potentially start in August and getting these transplanted and put out into the garden. Central Florida, of course, we're gonna wait another month, and South Florida, you're gonna wait a little bit longer. But even my South Floridians, even me in Central Florida, we can still have strawberries growing. My strawberry plant, which is an Albion, thank you, Connie, for giving it to me, is still growing and is actually producing fruit. It's really about moving it around. I honestly recommend that you do strawberries in containers most of the time because once we hit this time of year with the intense heat, they're just not fans of it. But if you can move it into shadier locations, many varieties of strawberries in Florida can keep going. So whether you have strawberries or you want to start strawberries, start investigating some varieties. There's a lot of great ones out there. I've done everything from Albion to Chandler to Quinault. Quinault's the ones that you usually find at Home Depot and Lowe's, and all of those have worked for me to varying degrees. My favorite at this point though is Albion. And now let's go into flowers. But all my people who only watch the beginning of this video and usually cut out at this point, you should hang around because there's a bunch of tips that are gonna help you with your vegetable garden that are coming in the flower section. So I'm gonna flip this around today. We won't get into flowering trees yet. Let's talk about adding native wildflowers and native plants to your garden. One of the big things I'm hearing a lot at this time of year, I'm getting lots and lots of comments, is how people's plants are overrun with bugs. And there's a couple different reasons why this might be happening. It can be because, one, the plant's just done. It's okay. Sometimes they're done. I think this is one of the hard things for Floridians to wrap their head around because it's summer. But if your plant was overrun with bugs and we were in November up north, you wouldn't be as weirded out by it, right? Because you'd just be like, oh, it's November, we're heading into winter time, we're done, right? But because it's summer, somehow in Florida, we don't recognize the fact that that's just the plant potentially just being done. And this is very common for a lot of your vegetable crops. If you had not cleaned out your beds from late spring, early summer, you're gonna see lots of these plants just get covered by bugs and eaten down. And that is just part of a natural process. And it's not because you're doing anything wrong and there's not anything in particular you need to do. The other reason a lot of people are having bug problems is because their garden is out of balance. You have a lot of food, you don't have any predators. So what I'm gonna talk about is 3 things you could be doing to balance your garden so that you can have a much more balanced ecosystem. Number 1, when it comes to the caterpillar type bugs that eat your vegetables, I'm talking about all of your brassicas, I'm talking your lettuces. You usually see those green little worms. They're not worms, they're caterpillars. They might be a caterpillar that turns into a moth, or they might be one that actually turns into a butterfly. If you want to reduce those type of bugs, you need more birds. So what does that mean? That means we need to create some things for birds so that they are fed regularly. And one of the ways you can do that is actually adding host plants to attract caterpillars to your garden. The difference is you're gonna focus on things that are not gonna eat your vegetables. One of the ones that you might want to consider, and I talked about recently in this video, this isn't grass, is you add a host plant. You can do this as a lawn alternative, you can add a butterfly garden, but if you bring in butterflies that like to put their caterpillars in, I'm talking monarchs, I'm talking cloudless sulfurs, I'm talking about your white peacocks. You're gonna bring in songbirds regularly who know that there are caterpillars in your yard. And then you put these near your vegetable garden, so when the bugs that lay eggs and then have caterpillars that go on your veggies, those birds are ready and searching because they know your yard, your garden is a place for caterpillars. Number 2, if you want to get ladybugs in your garden, I highly recommend you add milkweed, specifically swamp milkweed. This is one of our native milkweeds. It is gorgeous and beautiful, and you'll get tons of monarchs in your yard. But one of the complaints from the butterfly gardeners is always that we have aphids on them. Now, these are not the aphids that will go onto your vegetable crops. These are a totally different type of aphid. But they will create a regular supply of aphids, which means there is food more of the year for ladybugs. This is what will then create a higher population of ladybugs near your vegetable garden so that you don't get overwhelmed by things like aphids in your garden. And number 3, add things like scorpion tail to your garden. Scorpion tail is great at attracting small wasps, and small wasps like small caterpillars, they like small aphids, and they eat a lot of them. Keeping these plants, again, near your vegetable garden keeps wasps moving through and checking regularly for little tiny bugs that are about to go and eat all your vegetable crops. So by doing these 3 different activities, you can increase predators in your gardens that are going to help protect your vegetables and create a lot less loss for you. Now, those aren't the only native plants that you should be considering at this time of year, especially for my people who want to have blooms in their garden. As we are heading into fall, as we head into August, there are a lot of different types of plants that are going into bloom. One that I finally got to work in my garden this year, and I'm so excited it's starting to go into bloom, is southeast sunflower. These 2 to 3 inch sunflowers are native to the state of Florida, and they are gorgeous. They get really tall. They can get 6, 7, 8 feet tall, and they create just a big, gorgeous, yellowy orange bloom in this time of year. Another thing is goldenrod. We have a lot of types of goldenrod that are native to Florida. You can go as high up as seaside goldenrod, which get huge, like at 12 feet tall, but you can go with much smaller ones like Wand's goldenrod, Chapman's goldenrod, sweet goldenrod. These are kind of more in that 2, 3, 4, 5 foot range. Goldenrod's a great one to add because it's actually really critical to monarch migration, and it provides a great nectar source for them. Plus, it attracts tons of bees. So anyone who's doing bee honey farming, like get yourself some goldenrod. Other things that are in bloom at this time of year are also orange coneflower, plus some of the liatrices, and some of our milkweeds are going into bloom. Things like butterfly weed and our native swamp milkweed are also going into bloom. Now, if you're considering going bigger and you're looking for trees that will be in bloom, I know I love adding these as blooming trees to this list because, man, when you drive by people's yards who have the big blooming trees, like it's just like, it's such a magical burst of color. So for everyone across the state, one of the ones that I see in a lot of people's yards, it's technically a large shrub, but most people shape it like a small tree, and that's gonna be Jatropha. Jatropha has those kind of coral reddish pink flowers. They have a tropical vibe, and butterflies really do enjoy the nectar on these plants. Another one that you could be considering is purple glory tree. I've been seeing these blooming around town, and they are a really rich, vibrant tropical purple. This is more for my central and south Floridians, but this smaller tree that's only about 15 feet tall is a great addition as a specimen piece so that you can get a little bit of bursts of tropical color in your garden. Now, when it comes to shrubs that are putting out a lot of blooms, if you're looking to add kind of a pale blue to your garden, plumbago. Plumbago is just so pretty. Plumbago just creates that kind of like icy cooling factor, even though it's so hot when it's flowering. Now this is the non-native version. There is a native version to Florida that has white flowers, but the shape of those flowers are different. So if you see them and they look white like this is not native. And if they look white and they look like this one is native. And when it comes to native big bloomers, our swamp mallow, AKA scarlet hibiscus, is in bloom. Nothing says tropical, nothing says wow like a scarlet hibiscus. Now, a few more tips for you to consider. As we head into August, we are heading into migratory season. So this is gonna be butterflies migrating and birds. And one of the things that impacts migratory season that is very simple for us to do no matter where we live is turn off our lights. Now, if you're worried a little bit about security, go ahead and leave your lights on until 9, 10 o'clock at night, but then make sure that they're turned off so that we can help these migratory birds get down south. And another reason to keep your lights off that you might not have thought of, and vegetable gardeners, have you stuck around for this bonus tip? Let me know in the comments. And that is the lights on the perimeter of your house, the lights shining out of your windows, well, they might be attracting those problematic pest bugs to your vegetable garden. When we look at some of the species of bugs that are eating your vegetables, well, some of them are moths, and moths love light. And if that light is hitting those beautiful cauliflowers, those beautiful Brussels sprouts, those big juicy tomatoes, well, you might have brought those tomato hornworms and those cabbage moths right to your garden. So a practice to consider during the classic vegetable garden season is making sure as we head into evening time is that we are closing our windows so that we're not having ambient light come out and turning off our perimeter lights so they're not shining on our vegetable garden. I feel like that's a really good tip. And if you're looking for more tips for your garden so that you can have the garden of your dreams in the Sunshine State, go ahead and pre-order your 2025 Wild Floridian Garden Planner right here. It has everything to help keep you on track with when you should be planting your vegetables. It also has lists to help you know what are the Florida favorite varieties, plus ideas on native plants to add to your garden, and tons of tips every single season and month. And if you want to learn more about the varieties that I recommend, go ahead and check out this playlist right here. Okay, I'll see you soon. Bye.